Social media is like a big notice board in the marketplace. What you put on it, everybody will see.
One major definition of integrity is that you should do the right thing even if nobody is looking at you.
At what point do we as a people stand still and say, no, we no longer want money to become that thing that determines who we choose as leaders?
We are 50% of the population, and I really feel that it would make a lot of difference, a big boost to our development if there were more women participation.
Imagine a station where you access information. Think of a station that creates awareness for national development. Imagine a station that prepares you for a bright and greater future. A station for all ages. Documentaries, classroom and television, events coverage, children's programs and variety shows. Always stay tuned to NTA Knowledge on the StarTimes platform, channel 359. For partnership, sponsorship and advert placements, contact us on NTA Knowledge. NTA Knowledge, learning to broaden horizon.
How are you? It's always a pleasure to welcome you to the program Thoughts for the Week with Cordelia. Well, today we're sharing something that I think we all should know, especially for those of us on the social media. Why? You'll find out. Since the explosion of the social media all over the world, things have been kind of dicey. Why? When things happen,
and on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall be looking at the legislative agenda for the 9th National Assembly.
All right, the legislature is the arm of government that is charged with the responsibility of making laws for the peace, order, and good governance of the country, as indicated in Section 4 of the 1999 Constitution as amended.
And you know, Kingsley, ours is a bicameral legislature made up of the Senate and the House of Representatives. And since Nigerians returned to democracy in 1999, one prominent feature of the National Assembly is the issue of legislative agenda.
Well, a legislative agenda maps out the priorities and goals that serve as a compass of legislative activities for the duration of the particular assembly, in this case 4 years, and it is intended to enhance the lawmaking process and deepen democracy ultimately. Now, the legislative agenda also serves to guide the lawmakers in the discharge of their duties as part of the social contract with the people for the promotion of good governance, as well as ensuring that there are checks and balances.
And the thrust of the legislative agenda in recent times centers on taking the business of legislature seriously, improving the living condition of the people, tackling corruption and insecurity, curtailing wastage and leakages of public funds, electoral reforms, supporting government programs aimed at poverty reduction, employment generation and wealth creation, among others.
Well, having a legislative agenda also helps the Assembly to prioritize bills and motions while also promoting the timely passage of quality bills as well as effective implementation of other legislative activities such as oversight functions and public hearings.
Of course, Kingsley, and as a result, there are widely held views that the legislature is increasingly becoming more assertive in the making of the nation's democracy in the last 3 electoral cycles.
Well, the role of the legislature over time, as we have seen in the last 20 years, has led to the enactment of a wide variety of pieces of legislation. And indeed, the presence of a legislative agenda for the 8th Assembly, which ended in early June this year, has been identified as one of the critical success factors of the 8th Assembly.
And you know, Kingsley, these efforts notwithstanding, there are divergent interests and opinions on what the legislative agenda of each assembly should be, especially for those who want the legislature to center more on issues like the poverty alleviation program, whistleblowing protection regime, passage of the petroleum industry governance bills, review of tax laws, e-legislature, among other issues.
All right, now the 2 chambers of the 9th National Assembly have already adopted their respective legislative agenda, and these include institutional needs assessment, a review of existing standing rules 2015 as amended, enhancing national revenue generation, ensuring regular budget cycles, that's from January to December, and of course being agents of transformation, as it were. But there are many issues arising from the passage, as it were, of the legislative agenda of the 2 chambers of the National Assembly. What are these other salient issues that can help the National Assembly perform its roles much more effectively in the course of the 9th Assembly? And how does the National Assembly, for instance, intend to entrench a number of burning issues on the national agenda? We will have guests in our conversation segment to provide answers to those questions and more on today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. So on that note, welcome you to the program. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Jumma Yusuf, joining Kingsley to welcome you as we broadcast live on the network service of the NTA. As usual, we shall bring you the complimentary segments of the program, including business, newspaper reviews, sports and others. But first, we now join Abdul Malik Adil for the morning highlights. Hello, Abdul.
Good morning, Juma, and good morning, Kingsley. It's good to have you join us on the morning news. And the Federal Executive Council has approved more than 2 billion naira for the provision of critical infrastructure to further strengthen security in the nation's aviation sector. This is coming less than a week after the sector was adjudged as one of the most secured in the aviation world. The council equally approved the construction of 2 oil and gas parks towards providing better service for the petroleum industry in the Nigeria.
413,963,035 naira and 75 kobo. This included all of the taxes, and the completion period, of course, is 2 months. That has been graciously approved by His Excellency Mr. President. This is in line with the suggestions and recommendations by UN Counter-Terrorism Unit and also the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO.
The federal government is reassuring Nigerians that it will neither abdicate its responsibility nor fail to provide them an atmosphere devoid of security threats and criminality for a stable and prosperous future. President Muhammadu Buhari, who stated this while launching this year's Armed Forces Remembrance Day emblem, appeal fund with 10 million naira, emphasizes that peace and security of Nigeria is non-negotiable.
The task of resettling and rehabilitating our citizens, as well as the reconstruction of territories affected by the war, will continue to be one of our priorities of this administration. We shall not rest until all our displaced persons are safely resettled within their communities.
I wish also to remind us
that the national security, without doubt, is the business of every Nigerian. I therefore call on Nigerians to be more security conscious.
President Muhammadu Buhari has assented to 5 bills, 2 of which will boost agricultural activities in Nigeria. Senior Special Assistant to the President on National Assembly Matters, Umar El Farouk, Yaqub made this known while addressing the press.
The first 3 university bills are quite similar, and indeed they have something in common to all the 3. Because what it does is to specify the minimum qualification of the chairman of the governing council of the universities, which is a minimum of university degree or its equivalent. It also seeks to regulate, as part of the bill, the ownership of intellectual property.
The meeting of the Committee on Consequential Adjustment of Salaries of Workers between the federal government and organized labor is still inconclusive after more than 10 hours of deliberation. Minister of Labor and Employment, Chris Igige, says tremendous progress has been made by the committee, but that there are areas that need to be addressed to pave way for easy implementation of the agreement when finally signed.
About 12 wage structures presently in Nigeria, which you know of. So we don't want to make mistakes that could be fatal, and thereby put the whole exercise we've done in jeopardy. Therefore, we have consensually agreed that we will reconvene this meeting at 7 p.m. today.
That is in the true spirit of collective bargaining, is give and take, and that is what we are trying to do and ensure that we get the process concluded and put everything behind all of us.
In a bid to curb leakages and ensure efficiency in the management of resources of government, President Muhammadu Buhari has approved for immediate implementation additional cost-saving measures aimed at instilling financial discipline and prudence, particularly in the area of official travels. As part of the measures, all ministries, departments and agencies are henceforth required to submit their yearly travel plans for statutory meeting and engagement to the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, as well as Head of Civil Service of the Federation for express clearance within the first quarter of the fiscal year. A statement from the Office of the Secretary to the Government of Federation, Boss Mustafa, notes that all public funded travels, local and foreign, must be strictly for official purposes, backed with documentary evidence and in the interest of the country, except otherwise approved by Mr. President, ministers, Permanent Secretary, Chief Executive Officers and Directors are restricted to not more than 2 foreign travels in a quarter, and the size of the minister's official delegation shall not exceed 4 persons. Also, extra-code allowances of official trips shall be limited to only the number of days of the event. The Auditor General of the Federation has been directed to effect these measures. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, has continued to warn against eroding regulatory standards and protection put in place after the 2018 global financial crisis, and for governments to keep robust macro-prudential policies. The fund is leading the conversation on policy steps to be taken towards safeguarding the economy from other global crises.
Issuing bonds in hard currency and in domestic currency is currently possible because of the favorable global financial conditions. Of course, it is key what countries such as Nigeria are doing with those borrowed funds, and as Evan was pointing out already, undertaking structural reforms to develop the economy is key.
Now, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, has advised the general public to beware of fraudsters and their cohort who use his designation and office to defraud unsuspecting Nigerians. In a statement, Boss Mustafa said his attention has been drawn to the unrelenting activities of faceless persons using the social media and other platforms to lure unsuspecting members of the public to submit their CVs at a fee to a non-existing desk at the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation for federal government appointment. Similarly, inaccurate information is being peddled around regarding constituency project being executed under its supervision, while numerous forged introductory letters purportedly issued from his office seeking diverse favors from individuals and corporate entities for personal gains are in circulation. Boss Mustafa notes that for the avoidance of doubt, the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation neither executes nor supervises constituency project. The SGF says government has evolved measures to track those unpatriotic and faceless persons and will bring to justice anyone found engaging in this unawesome activities. And that's the news highlight. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Jumai after this break.
The new edition of TV Guide is out, exclusively taking a look at the traditional television and new media. Are they comparable or complementary? Media industry players give perspective on the trends, progress, challenges, and the way forward. Find out on this compelling edition of TV Guide. Expository interviews with stars of the team within our space. Becky Madajemo of NTA, Utibe Umore of AIT, Nifemi Oguntai of TVC, and a host of others. TV Guide, your indispensable companion, also feature Iya Medina.
I'm the CEO, managing director of Iya Medina Sister Restaurant. I choose to serve. Shut up your mouth. Let me finish.
A TV drama series on NTA. Let's get to meet the characters behind Iya Medina. This edition also presents exciting features on tourism, culture, entertainment, sports, health, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendors near you or any NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
Nigeria Diaspora Investment Summit 2019 holds on the 6th to the 8th of November 2019. The summit will take place at the Banquet Hall Presidential Villa, Abuja, Nigeria. Theme: leveraging diaspora resources for economic growth. Sectors: agribusiness, education, training, healthcare, entertainment, sports, hospitality and tourism, infrastructure and real estate, manufacturing, extractive industries, telecommunications, technology and innovation, waste management and environmental remediation, transportation. For registration, visit www.ndis.gov.ng. For participation and sponsorship, please call 090-177-77008, 0817-2244-660. Convened by the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission.
An award that has succeeded to pool a galaxy of stars from the north, south, east to the west, and central Africa, and also those that are domiciled beyond the shores of Africa under one roof.
made in Africa with the birth of the first television station, WNTV, in Ibadan, Nigeria, on October 31, 1959.
I have great pleasure in formally launching Western Nigeria Television, first in Africa.
Television in Africa clocked 60 this year. It's time to celebrate this remarkable achievement. Various activities are lined up. Photo exhibition, a colloquium, public presentation of broadcasting books, and a gala night. Be part of these events, powered by Foundation for Ibadan Television Anniversary Celebrations, FITAC,
and supported by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
Thanks for joining us. OPEC and its allies pledge to help achieve stability in oil market till 2020. Let's now join Kunle Ade for details.
The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, Russia and other oil-producing countries known as OPEC Plus have pledged to cut production by 1.2 billion barrels per day until March 2020 to support oil prices. OPEC's Secretary General Mohamed Barakindo says the organization is committed to maintaining oil market stability beyond 2020 with physical supplies relatively tight globally. He added that compliance with production quotas among OPEC and its allies was at 136%, curbing global supplies, while production growth in North America, including the United States of America, shale basins was decelerating. And here is a quick check on Wednesday's tradings on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. With business news, I'm Kunle Ade.
Many thanks, Kunle, for the business package. Next for us is a newspaper review.
And our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Tiobe, is in the studio. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Juma. Good morning.
Pleasure
Good morning, Kingsley.
you.
Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Bayo, good to see you. Let's take a look at the Daily Sun newspaper. Daily Sun says, scammers using my office to defraud Nigerians. That's according to the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. And details are on page 11. Lead story says, Buhari moves to cut cost of governance. With two riders, slashes extra codes and size of delegation for ministers, and directs MDAs to submit travel costs. And then also there on the front page, it says, anxiety as NJC interviews new Supreme Court justices. Hellfire in Onitsha. Fuel tanker sets Ochanja market ablaze. Daughter, mom dead, 6 houses burnt. Bayelsa governorship election tension as youth disrupt INEC meeting in Yenagoa. And illicit financial flow, Nigeria loses 17 billion naira annually. That's according to Transparency International and CISLAC.
And coming from the Punch newspaper, just above the masthead, Federal Executive Council approves 5.4 billion naira for gas parks, airport security. You find that on page 29. And fraudsters using my office to defraud Nigerians. That's coming from the Secretary to Government of the Federation. You find that on page 13. Banditry. Sultan governors demand prosecution of inducted monarchs. That's on page 24. Beside the Punch masthead, Buhari slashes ministers' foreign trips. Extra quotes. That's on page 13. Lawan, that's the Senate President. Christian lawmakers pray for Nigeria. October 31st. You find that on page 14. And the bold headlines there, experts oppose IMF's call for tax hike, says Nigeria's overtaxed. With riders, increasing tax will help FG to offset debts, execute projects. That's coming from the fund administrators. LCCI, Dawn orders advises government to widen tax net. And the disturbing picture story there, woman, child, 3 others burnt in Onitsha tank fire. That's on page 24. University of Ibadan sets up panel to expose Randy lecturers. You find that on page 45. Police arraign Benue serial killer, 6 others. You find that on page 11. Bauchi reshuffles cabinet. Finance commissioner resigns. That's on page 23. And at the bottom plate of the Punch newspaper, Melaye Adeyemi trade words over Kogi senatorial poll rerun. That's on page 23. Unizik sacks embattled lecturer withdraws PhD after Punch reports. You find that on page 4 and 5. And federal government allocates 169.8 billion for roads in 2020. You find that on page 2. Bio.
Well, let's start on the sad note from Onitsha, where a petrol tanker tipped over again and burst into flames. This happened at a place that is called as Upper Eweka Road in Onitsha, Anambra State. The fire extended to some business areas to the extent that it included an area that is called Ochanja Market. Some petrol stations were also said to be in the area, so there was fear that the fire could get out of hand. Police have confirmed that a woman and her baby, unfortunately, were killed. They were burned beyond recognition. Witnesses, however, say that they saw 4 other bodies. About 6 houses were also burned. But the concern is that tanker accident, which is also resulting into inferno, is becoming most frequent, and therefore there must be the Federal Road Safety Commission and the Association of Tanker Drivers must take measures to reduce these incidences, because the loss of lives is becoming very high and very frequent indeed. In the last 1.5 months, we had about 4 or 5 such instances, and it's very concerning. Talking about costing now.
The point you made is noted, but partly you find, I don't know, maybe there are no reports, or maybe there are reports, but I haven't seen those reports, of persons being prosecuted for this kind of incident. And then we also find families of persons who have suffered losses suing whoever the owner of the tanker was, whoever the owner of the petrol was, for damages. Until people begin to take this more seriously, we will never get out of it. It's not just a tanker fire that consumes somebody. Somebody was driving the tanker. Somebody owns that tanker. Somebody owns the fuel. So there's liability.
Liability, yes.
And it's also important that the judiciary, when such matters do come up, should treat such cases with a great deal of dispatch, and then get the stories properly publicized. That's be the responsibility of the media. Yes. Things like this cannot happen in other climes, and you just get away with it. We take it as one of those things. The road is bad. The tanker drivers, they will go on strike. It doesn't. No, it's immaterial. As you know, if you recall, we discussed on Good Morning Nigeria some time ago when they had this frequent fire incidents involving tanker drivers in Lagos.
Yes.
One of them on Otedola Bridge that consumed so many vehicles.
Yes.
We had, of course, there was one that the fuel was leaking from the tanker under the at the underpass.
Under the hose, yes.
Yes, at Maryland. And people just go away with it and say, okay, fine, you have suffered your loss, go and lick your wounds. No, it is not so. People have to take responsibility for what has happened. A number of these tankers are overloaded.
Some are also in poor serviceable condition.
Yes.
Right. So the essence of liability, holding them responsible for such losses is very imperative. Yes. But in our climb here, when such things happen, people say it's an act of God. There is an act of carelessness, and those responsible must be held accountable. So in future,
I agree with you. This is not an act of God.
The police must have arrest, yes. And the director of public prosecution must look into that to ensure that they are brought to book.
When they begin to pay huge amounts of money,
damages,
I think they will look into all this.
Because at the end of the day, the tanker, the owner, all of them, they have insurance covering them.
If they don't have insurance, let them go and take insurance.
And most of the drivers escape. Innocent citizens die.
Talking about cutting costs now, President Muhammadu Buhari has approved cost-saving measures, and they are very far-reaching, especially they affect incidences of travel. Now, public officers are now required to submit their program of travel to the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation or the head of civil service of the Federation for a period of a quarter, and this should be for every fiscal year. They are to use a template which will indicate the frequency. The frequency is not supposed to be more than twice in a quarter. The ministers, permanent secretaries, chairman of the extra ministerial department have also been restricted. They are the only ones that can fly by business class. Others are to go in economic class. And the delegation of ministers and such officers should not exceed 4. Those lower are expected to be 3. And for purposes of travel, ESTA codes shall now cover only the days of event. ESTA code shall not be paid for travel days to and fro any longer. And it is said that it should be adhered to strictly, and the Auditor General of the Federation is required to treat as ineligible all expenses outside the guideline. Meanwhile, the President also yesterday launched the 2020 Armed Forces Remembrance Emblem, and this is to go on until January 15, the day that is set aside for Armed Forces Remembrance Day. This is to commemorate the day the Nigerian Civil War ended. The President used the occasion that as Nigerians, we must de-emphasize the differences which often is harped upon to create this unity, and rather harp on the diversity we have to emphasize our diversity. He says those who suffered, who paid the supreme sacrifice, deserve our remembrance and prayers, and those who are still fighting, particularly in the insurgency war front and other security areas, deserves our prayers. He said our sympathy and help should go to those who have suffered incapacitation in defending the territorial integrity of our nation. We must avoid actions that divide us and continue to emphasize our diversity as a means of conferring solidarity on us. Consensus has not been re-attained yet. You are aware of the concessional negotiation on a minimum wage. Yes. This time around, it is the concessional adjustment. So far, there have been some progress, but the meeting terminated yesterday at 8:30 p.m. The chairman, the chief conciliator, the Minister of Labour and Employment said parties are to return today at 2 p.m. to continue. However, they've been able to narrow the margin. On the side of Labour, they have come down from their 29% demand for those on level 7 to 14 to 25%, while the federal government party has come off from 11% to 17%. So they are inching closer. But for those on level 15 to 17, Labour has come down from 25% to 20%, and federal government has come out from 6.5% to 12%. There are indications that the narrow margin will be scaled hopefully today, and the threat of a strike will completely be abated. Meanwhile, Labour has so far made a concession of about 5%, but the government party have been more considerate. They've made a concession about 7 to 7.5%.
When the negotiations are done with regard to the consequential adjustments, I've been seeing some footage from the briefing sessions addressed usually by the Minister of Labour and Employment, who is serving as a conciliator in this case. You were saying a while ago, federal government. So we are through with the minimum wage.
Yes.
This is the consequential adjustment. And Labour is negotiating with the federal government. Is the federal government negotiating on behalf of the state governments? Is the federal government also negotiating on behalf of local governments? Or what the federal government agrees with Labour will now be deemed to apply automatically to state governments and to local governments? Is the federal government in charge of the finances of the states and local governments? If we don't have the capacity to pay on the basis of these percentages we are talking about, where will the Labour will now say, okay, we are going to do a LUTA state by state?
Or is the state government renegotiating with the state Labour?
Already, some state government have given indication that they will pay the 30,000 naira. Others have said they pay more than the 30,000 naira. Others have also cried out they can't afford to pay. But don't forget that the issue of minimum wage was passed as a law of the Federation. Yes, the states are autonomous, but again, that was the issue that came to fore. the ability to pay. But so far, let's see how things will work out. Already state governments are making concessions, and the other carrot, or rather the stick that they probably will have to come with it, is the challenge for state government that say that if they are forced to pay, then they'll be forced to lay off some workers, which labor is not
the issue is not with minimum wage now. The state governments have been making the statements you said. Oh, we will pay 30,000, we will not be able to pay 30,000. That is fine. It's the consequential adjustment. That was part of the reason why Labour was threatening to go on strike beginning yesterday.
Yes.
It's a consequential adjustment. Are you going to compel state governments to also go along with the percentages that you have agreed? And then after that, the state governments will be coming cap in hand to Abuja for bailout?
Already, the chairman of the Nigeria Governors Forum has already cried out that state governments will not be able to meet, and therefore, in the process of negotiation, the ability to pay must be taken seriously into consideration.
Like Kisley said, some state governments have indicated that they can pay.
Others say they can't pay. So it's
not a unanimous decision, actually.
The other issue I want to draw attention to is the story Juma read and Kingsley also read, that traditional rulers who have said to be complicit in security challenges going on should be prosecuted.
Yes.
The Sultan is on record as saying that. Also, there are reports indicating that the successes in criminal and criminality attained so far have shown complicity with members of the security. There is a hunter, a renowned hunter, Ali Kwara, who has been helping some security agencies to arrest armed robbers on criticals, had a repentant armed robber in Kano revealing to him that they are getting their arms supply from security agencies. On 3-4 occasions, he had been led them secretly to purchase arms and ammunition. On the 4th trend, he went with the military and they arrested 26 officers of the Nigerian Civil Defense Corps, 6 military personnel who are complicit in arms deal with these criminals. If we go on there's also, he had a 15-man gang team that work with politicians. This is in Osun State. This chap was arrested. He's involved in kidnapping of kids, and he had kidnapped 3 in Ibadan, 4 in Osogbo, and other in Ibadan. And for each one, he collects 100,000. He has a gang of 15 persons, and he says that they are backed by politicians and a traditional ruler. 5 times he has been arrested. 5 times the traditional ruler has secured his release. This time around, he has been apprehended. And he has made money. He says what? He has used the money to build a house for himself. He has also built a mosque and a church to appease God for his misdemeanor.
You see the problem we face in this country.
So these complicities must be identified and eliminated.
All right. Well, let's take the editorial. This is still on salary. Editorial is from Daily Independent at page 16. Imperative of special salary structure for teachers.
Well, teachers are now wanting to have their reward here on earth. They are no longer patient to wait till heaven before they get their rewards.
They deserve it.
In the days gone, teachers were the most revered in society. If we were a child that were not properly, the moment your parents threaten to report you to your teacher, you will sit up. But these days, teachers are no longer revered. And therefore, the editorial is happening on what the national leadership of the Nigerian Union of Teachers had drawn attention to. They want a teacher's special salary structure. And they are indicating that if this is done, it will bring it into what is done as the best global practices, whereby teachers are among the highest paid, and also teachers are accorded the special treatment, whereby capacity building to ensure that they are always ahead of development around the world is attained. There's also calling for capital investment as recommended by United Nations as regard education, because the percentage of capital allocation to education is very poor. On the whole, they are saying that the future of education behoves on having improved teachers and a teaching environment. The Daily Independent is of the view that the Nigerian Union of Teachers' demand is legitimate, and government should be able to help to redeem the image of education at all levels of our nation.
Ayatobe, thank you for being around.
Thank you too.
We'll see you again tomorrow, hopefully. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with the details of the legislative agenda for the 9th National Assembly.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
What we are really cultivating here is a better future for all Nigerian women, and it's not always easy. Panadol Extra relieves headache, backache, joint pain, toothache, and menstrual pain. The pain is worth it.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Please, did you hear that?
Of course I did. That is village headmaster tune.
So, Auntie Amebo was not gossiping then?
Village headmaster is celebrating 50 years. 50?
Already?
Wait, you mean people have been watching village headmaster since 1968? How time flies. I have retired, but not tired.
And 50 years now. So because of that, we won't get a big party.
New date, now 28th to 29th October 2019.
And me, I'm a body invite you now, and my belly just is sweet. Because I don't say all those people they drink my party, then go come drink the tombo again. And me, radio jam, they call you now. They could not forget it.
Not so fast. Look, I'm tired. I want to check out of this country for greener pastures. Just calm down for a moment. Please sit down. Do you have a job where you're going to? No, but someone is arranging, Listen, Alinko. Checking out of this country without proper planning means one thing. Unimaginable begin. I've been in the diaspora, but legitimately doing great things at home and abroad. As I've been saying, without the proper footing abroad, the risk is not worth it. Listen, Alinko, it's better to be home than be trapped abroad or even end up in prison.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's Good Morning Nigeria, the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Our topic for conversation today is the Legislative Assembly. Let's take this background first by our correspondent, Kunle Adeyeye.
Since the return to civil rule in 1999, the two chambers of the National Assembly have been coming up with legislative agenda to guide them in the discharge of their duties. Shortly after his emergence as the president of the 9th Senate, Ahmed Lawan pledged to fashion out an effective agenda that will guide the senators. Consequently, the Senate came up with a 12-point agenda that includes institutional needs assessment, review of existing standing rules 2015 as amended, transparency and accountability, capacity enhancements, lawmaking and national and subnational initiatives. Other areas include sectoral reforms and interventions, economic growth and diversification, revenue budgets and appropriation, communication strategies and civic orientation engagement, internal as well as external relations and implementation, monitoring and evaluation. The decision, the Senate says, it arrived at after extensive consultations with critical stakeholders. The House of Representatives also unveiled its legislative agenda that will guide the 360 members of the Green Chamber in the next 4 years. The agenda seeks to make the 9th House of Representatives a reformed assembly, a center of policy innovation, and an agent of transformation. The House believes that the agenda is an ambitious one it intends to achieve in improving the lives of Nigerians. To what extent can the agenda of the Senate and the House of Representatives achieve the desired goals? Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will give insight shortly.
And joining us in the studio is Professor Osareme Wasumbo, a two-time senator and former governor of Edo State. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much.
Also on the program is, unfortunately, one of our guests is missing here. He has not been able to come and join us in the studio. Maybe in the course of the program, he'll be able to join us. Kingsley?
All right, we have with us on the studios Honorable Benjamin Kalu. Honorable Kalu is the chairman of the House of Reps Committee on Public Affairs. Is also the spokesperson of the House. Honorable Kalu, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Same here, thank you.
All right. Also here with us, one of our regular analysts, Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu, Public Affairs commentator. Pleasure to have you.
The pleasure is mine. Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, let's begin with distinguished Senator Osumbo. You served in the Senate for 2 terms. What is the essence of a legislative agenda?
Well, an agenda, as you know, is a plan, sort of plan of action, which in the case of the National Assembly, the Senate develops and adopts for its legislative work. Same thing happens in the House of Representatives. As they say, those who fail to plan to fail. So by evolving and developing an agenda, at least it's an indication that there's a plan to succeed. The next thing is to what extent has the person or the body, the institution that has developed the agenda be able to implement that agenda. So it's a good beginning, and it shows focus, it shows direction, that the legislature can be held accountable and by which their performance can be assessed and judged. So it is good. The tradition has endured, and we have seen that this current National Assembly has followed in step with the kind of tradition that has been established of setting an agenda. And I am happy from what I have been able to gather about the agenda that they have publicized, they have published, is that it keys into the key programs of the executive, of the government. So where the legislature and the executive are working in sync, both the executive agenda, the legislative agenda have been synchronized, then there is an indication that things will work better for our country. There are, of course, other aspects of the agenda which relate to representing and effectively assuring the electorate that their interests, their concerns are being followed up and implemented by them who are the elected representatives of the people. It is easy. The legislators are those that the electorate can easily interact with, and they feel the pulse a lot, quite a lot, across the length and breadth of the country. From what I have deciphered so far, the agenda tries to reflect what would be the popular aspirations of Nigerians, and to that extent is commendable. As I said, the next step is to be able to monitor the implementation, the execution of that agenda, and to see to what extent it has succeeded in meeting with the set goals.
Well, you've said that Nigeria, you know, it's protecting the interest of Nigerians, and experts say that they've been dishing out all these legislative agendas since democracy came back in 1999, and they say that what makes it so different this time around? What is so unique about the 9th Assembly and their legislative agenda? Honorable Benjamin Kalu.
Thank you very much, and thank you viewers for tuning in. Like the prof said, the legislative agenda is like a roadmap to the destination that one wants to get to, and it's a product of these analysis. You don't just package a document out of the blues, not just because it's a tradition, but because it is a product of analysis that have been conducted with regards to the needs of the people. And like your question said, how is this going to be different? It's going to be different because there is a synergy between the executive and the legislature at the moment. Not a synergy in the sense of, like people say, rubber stamping. You know, the legislature, they are now like rubber stamps. No. Synergy in the sense that we believe that we are three arms of government, yet we are one government. And our strength is shown in how we cooperate with one another to achieve the desire of the public interest, you know. So that is what is going to be different. We understand the definition of the objective, the goal of the current executive, and we know they are not just working for themselves. They want to work for Nigerians. They are working for Nigerians. And we have been elected to work for Nigerians as well. So interpreting the needs of Nigeria, matching it with the objective of the executives, and helping the executive realize that is what is going to be different between now and the past assembly. The past assembly could not establish this relationship. There was so much acrimony between the two arms of government. People tend to celebrate this acrimony, you know, that shows that we are doing a watchdog activity, the checks and balances that is found in separation of power, you know, as propounded by John Locke. But for us, we are seeing the interrelationship between these arms for the interests of the masses. So bringing that dynamics on board, it is going to change the narratives, and it is going to be for the interest of Nigeria. So implementation will be better achieved with the 9th Assembly. It's not just going to be a paperwork. It's not just going to be a Google map that you can. It's going to be something that will touch, you know, the lives of people, and people are going to feel it, you know, in this 9th Assembly. That's what is going to be different.
Oh, okay, thank you very much, Honorable Carlo. I'm sure that some of your members who are watching now and hearing what you're saying were also members of the 8th Assembly. On Good Morning Nigeria the other week, we discussed the outcome of scientific research, that's political scientific research, indicating the performance of the 8th Assembly. One of the critical success factors of the 8th Assembly, in spite of the acrimonious relationship that the leadership of the 8th Assembly had with the executive, was that the 8th Assembly did exceedingly well.
Oh, yeah, they did exceedingly well, but we're going to do more. We're going to do better than what they did. If they did exceedingly well in the 8th Assembly, the executives, the budget, if you remember, the budget took a long time to be passed in the 8th Assembly. And, anytime you delay the budget, passing the budget, scientific research has shown that plus or minus every 100 days, it depresses the economy by 2.5%. And it is strange for Nigerians to believe that all was well with the 8th Assembly in their relationship with the executive. Nigerians felt the impact because the MDAs were not able to be energized on time to work for the public. And that is what matters to the common man. Your relationship with the executive, the common person in the rural area is not interested in what you are doing. All they're interested is that those roads are supposed to be built, that they are built. Those schools that are dilapidated, that they are taken care of. The needs of the common man can only be captured when the budget is implemented and that's on time. That was not achieved by the 8th Assembly. It took a long time, and it's a minus for them. No matter the scientific research that has, applauded them. And I know, like you said, most of them are also in this 9th Assembly. But the energy with which they came now is different. Let me give you an example. During the presentation of the budget in the 8th Assembly and the 9th Assembly, the body language of the House then and the body language during the last presentation, they were not the same. You saw they were booing the president. It was like a gathering of charlatans and hooligans. Number one, citizen of the country being shouted at when it wasn't decent. So, but this time around, you saw the gathering of decent, civilized people who wanted to hear, no matter if the president was saying even the wrong thing, they were calm, patient, cooperative to hear the president, the number one citizen of the country, speak. We are not saying that we're going to support every of his agenda. We're not saying that the budget, we are currently analyzing, disagreeing with some of the propositions made in the budget. Yes, that is our duty. That we want to work with the executive does not mean that everything they say, we are going to okay it. No. There have been some gaps we found in the course of our interacting with the propositions they have presented to us, the budget estimates. That we are going to highlight, and that we are going to hammer on, and that we are going to insist that they change. That is what defines our role.
Okay, right. Thank you very much, Honorable Carlo. Let's bring in now Dr. Abu Hamisu. Dr. Hamisu, of course, it's quite clear what the constitutional provisions are, and some persons will say that those constitutional provisions with regard to the imperative work of the legislature being to make laws for the peace, order, and good governance, those things are vague. But now when you have a legislative agenda, the tendency is to enlarge and then narrow down specifically what you want to focus on for the 4 years while you are in office. Is this a tradition that has served us well, or it is just another paperwork?
Okay, maybe let me take it from this angle. The ICPC released a report of their constituency visitations that cut across the National Assembly members, both Senate and House of Reps. And so far, they've recovered about 900 billion in spite of legislative agenda. Now, when you just oppose that with the agenda, there is a great difference between rhetorics and actual happenings. If legislative agenda will serve the purpose it is designed to serve, as Prof. rightly explained, I think by now would have gone far. But when a document is used as a justification, as something that is to present an institution as doing its work, but beneath that, you don't get the actual delivery, there is a problem. What I want to see with the current legislative agenda is not just a mere document that will be used as a justification, but following through with actions that actually convey and align the agenda with the actions of those that are supposed to implement it. So the dichotomy between initiating, going through the process of analysis the way Honorable Benjamin highlighted, and then coming up with issues that are supposed to be tackled. We're supposed to form the basis of their interventions in the politics, in the economy, and a whole lot of areas and sectors and subsectors. would have at least buoyed the economy, would have been able to galvanize support, not only for the executive, but for the legislator and legislatures. Well, in a situation whereby there is a dichotomy between deeds and the document, then there is a problem. And going into the agenda, I've seen reforming the legislature, which is commendable, and a whole lot of issues. But there is something I want to even see that is not there. Cutting cost. Cutting cost. Because the economy is not buoyant. Everything is being done to show up the economy, to be able to... the critical thing now is to even fund some of the things that the government wants to do. And if you look at the budget and what is being allocated to the National Assembly, you agree with me that Nigerians have been demanding for reforms, not only at the national level, but equally at the state level. So whatever agenda that will not align with cutting of costs, where the citizens are being overtaxed, data tax, consumable tax, social tax, and so on and so forth. And we're not seeing that again be replicated in the other arm of government that people are saying is taking so much from the economy, is taking so much from the budget, is taking so much from most of the monies that are supposed to go into social investment. Then there is a gap as far as I'm concerned. So basically, if you put this together, what has been happening in Nigeria, I continue to say this, is the clash between public interest and personal interest. So when you have documents, policies, programs, interventions that speak to public interest, but at the point of delivery, the drivers of the process are concerned with their private interest, there is always a problem. And this is where we find ourselves in around these issues of corruption, misappropriation of funds, embezzlement, and then you find ICPC saying we've recovered 900 billion from, because once there was a committee in place by ICPC, and they be visiting most of the constituencies and senatorial zones. Okay, Abdurrahman, you took so amount of money to furnish the hospital in your location. Where is the hospital? What have you done? And you find out that those persons have not done anything with those money. So I'm sure, Honorable, going forward, this legislative agenda should guard against something like that, so that there will be that alignment between agenda and actual delivery.
Okay, talking about the agenda and actual delivery, most Nigerians say accessibility is a problem. Yeah. So I'm looking at, is the 9th Assembly going to open doors for Nigerians to be part of the process? Do you think it's going to be possible?
Now, that has been the fight.
Yes.
That also I was saying that in the agenda, it will be most convincing if you talk about cost cutting. By the time you talk about cost cutting, it means that you are willing. I saw transparency and accountability. It has always been there. My friends in the civil society, which I belong, yes, we've been clamoring, asking questions. How much is the take-home pay of a senator? How much is the take-home pay of House of Reps members? The constituency project, how is it executed? All of these questions, nobody is willing to answer. So when you talk about transparency and accountability in this agenda, that is why I'm talking about aligning agenda with actual delivery. So it's one thing to say we are going to do this, and it's another thing to actually follow through with it. And we've written a lot using freedom of information, Honorable, up to now, but you are promising us that 9th Assembly is going to be different. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse. So since it's here, we'll follow up.
Can I take on Dr. Hamisu, let's get some of the highlights of the House of Reps agenda, because the Senate also has its. Yeah. So what are the highlights of the legislative agenda for the 9th Assembly?
Okay, before I go into that, I'm sure my friend from the civil society has gotten this document. If you don't have it, I'm offering you to come to my office for us to give you this legislative agenda. Okay. Page 64, if you have this document, handled what you are just saying. On 2.11, it says reducing cost of governance. The House will take legislative measures to carry out the prudent reduction of the cost of governance in the country in order to free funds that will then be deployed to meet some of our numerous and pressing national development challenges. We will encourage the effort of the executive arm of government to address waste in government by, amongst other things, eliminating duplication and inefficiencies across MDAs. So, it is not true that we did not mention anything about cost of governance. That taken. If you go to the highlights, we have reforms of the House of Representatives. We started with ourselves. Before going to the executive, when you want to pick something from somebody's eye, remove the one from yours first. We looked at ourselves and said, what is it that we need to do better? We say we have to reform our processes. We have to, the way we conduct our public hearing, the way we handle the constituency projects you are talking about. The Speaker has mandated that he will tour with the principal officers, not ICPC this time. He will be visiting most constituencies. We have what we call town hall, like she asked you before, access to the parliament. We say it's the people's parliament. People don't really have access to, them. We are going to have town hall meetings across the country where the principal officers will come and engage with the public. And while on that town hall meetings, the principal officers will tour constituency projects within the state to know where this money that has been allocated, where it goes to. You understand? Also, within us, we have reformed the process to show accountability and transparency in our internal financial management, to know how much is coming from the budget. Is it enough? If you will recall, for 10 years now, the budget of the National Assembly has always been between 120 to 125 billion. Year in, year out. Even when dollar was, 180, it was still 120, 125 billion up till now, which means we are using half of what we used 10 years ago to run the National Assembly. And a lot of institutions have emerged out of the National Assembly that will help us deliver the job very well. The employment of staff has increased, and yet we are still in the old budget of 10 years ago. So we are looking at that and say, how do we maximize the use of this to avoid duplication of expenses and waste and all the rest of them? That is one on our own side. And also the processes of public hearing, the processes of committee meetings. What is the cost of handling committee meetings? Do we need to reduce it? Is it too much? We started with ourselves. From there, we went to social justice, to look at, the common needs of every man. Are they taking care of the child abuse that is happening every day? Is it supposed to be like that? Is there anything we can do about that? Gender equality, is there anything we can do about that? And then you go to the right of prisoners. Is there anything we can do about that? It's no longer called prisoners. Prison is now, we have a new law now that's called them correctional services. So from there we go to sustainable power. These are real needs of the people. Are we going to continue having this epileptic source of energy? Is it time to diversify into other types? We are blessed with sunlight. Can we look at solar energy, wind, and all the rest of them? Is there what we can do about that? How do we encourage the MDAs, the executive, to achieve that? These are real needs of the people. Now, climate change has never been so loud now than it was before. So we are prioritizing on the environment. Every day you are hearing a lot of flood, destroying this and that. We want to encourage the MDAs, the Ecological Fund, the Ministry of Environment to make sure we give them the legislative interventions that they need to make sure they're able to help Nigerians solve all these challenges. Economic growth, development, and job creation is a major thing. You know that the 70% of our population of 180 to 200 million, they are youths. And depending on oil, will not generate the kind of employment that we need. So the need to diversify into non-oil sector is there. And that is what will create more employment for these teeming youths. So we are looking into that as one of the area of priority. We are looking at, I mentioned gender equality, education reform. The statistics have shown that out of every 5 kids from the age of 5 to 15 that is out of school. One is residing in Nigeria, and that is not a good report. So we are going to look at the curriculum, national curriculum. Are we supposed to change it? The Ministry of Education is handling that at the moment. We want to give them all the support to make sure that our curriculum will shift from what it is now to what will develop more skills, towards technology and innovation, so that we'll become a productive country. So that is what we're looking in education. Anti-corruption. We're going to partner with ICPC, EFCC, and all the rest of them to make sure that we join the president and the executive in their fight. Sustainable agriculture, security, which is paramount. What is happening in the north. For 10 years now, we're battling with insurgency, we're battling with cattle rustling, and now kidnapping has set in. And if you go to the south, the overstretched defense force, some people are taking it for granted and doing some, being involved in some vices. I was hearing the conversation we were having outside there about somebody kidnapping kids and selling for 100,000 and not the rest of them. So these are challenges that we want to help the government by providing more fund for training and for the security agents to make sure they have more money to be trained. And then also I had a visit from the military. One person came to visit me in my office because I also am in charge of public affairs. You know what this military man said? He said, I've been in the military for about 15 years and I only earn 30,000. This 30,000 is not enough for me to do anything. And if tomorrow I carry gun and go and shoot on the street and become an armed robber, people will blame me. But look at it, I earned 30,000, and I was surprised. So this is what is happening. We need to provide more funds for them, make their welfare our priority, and all the rest. And then we are encouraging open governance.
Just hold on a second, yes. Honorable Kalu. The items that you have ticked off as part of the highlights of the agenda for the House of Reps, they're noted. But let's return to cutting the cost of governance. Which you mentioned in trying to explain part of the point made by Dr. Hamisu. President Buhari yesterday approved new guidelines for foreign travels by government officials, ministries, departments, and agencies. What will be the attitude, for instance, of the House of Reps to those new guidelines?
Of course we will support it. We will support it because it is in our agenda. Our agenda is to reduce the cost of governance. We are also looking inward in our own arm, and we are reducing costs, which will also be making public very soon. Things that used to be there that we don't want it to be there again, because we have a very lean budget, and we must cut our coats according to our size. That is the reality.
Okay. I asked that question because I said MDAs, so that the lawmakers would not say, we are not part of your MDAs. Yes. And the rule, absolutely. And the rule now is, if you are going on a foreign travel, the days of travel will not be excluded as part of the extra code collection. Yes. That's why I asked the question.
Yes, of course. We are looking inward, like I told you, and we are eliminating the things that are not necessary. There are some trainings overseas that are not, conferences overseas that are not necessary. We are cutting them off. I can assure you that the leadership of the House, they are very cost sensitive. Do you know, there is a misrepresentation out there about the members of the National Assembly. I'm sure Prof has been in the Senate, 2 times, and he knows the truth. The impression that people have outside there about what is available to a legislature is not really what it is. Now, for example, most of the ministers that emerge have been given vehicles, to take care of them. We have been working for 3 to 4 months, and we are using taxis and our private vehicles. And that is the truth.
Yeah, not one chance taxi, by the way. so
you never can tell.
No, well, if it was one chance, you would be here.
You're not sure how I came.
You're not getting us into the 5.5 billion that the legislature wants to spend on purchase of vehicles. That's a contentious public issue. But let's pause in the meantime and bring in again Professor Osumbo. Professor Osumbo, I mean, part of the evaluation of the 8th Assembly, which was a topic that we discussed here, highlighted, curiously, I mean, on the face of it, that the National Assembly itself is under-resourced. in terms of funding, even in terms of manpower, that yes, you have lawmakers, but the support staff that they need and the support systems that they need, happily they're talking about the budget office, that the professionals that you will need aren't immediately available, and that if you need to engage consultants, then it's going to cost you money. If you recall, during the 8th Assembly, part of the reason for the rejection of some bills was just, sloppy editing of the bills that were forwarded to Mr. President for his accent. In your opinion, and therefore from your experience, how might the National Assembly maximize its resources, notwithstanding current challenges, and then get the public to actually say, all right, fine, this agenda is out there and it's for our interest and we'll support you?
Well, thank you, Kingsley. Let me first say the last question you asked the Honorable Member Kanu.
The one-on-one chance or something?
No, about
want me to finish answering.
About the foreign travels, and the Estacos and things like that. The President said the Auditor General of the Federation has responsibility to monitor and check these things and to disallow allowances which are ineligible. And that applies to all arms of God. There's no separate Auditor General for the legislature. So the Auditor General of the Federation would also ensure that the National Assembly comply with the presidential directives. The other issue is with respect to
under-resourcing.
Yes, I will come to that. Yes. To the issue of the comparison between the 8th National Assembly and the 9th National Assembly with respect to the number of bills that were passed by the 8th National Assembly. I think people should be careful about looking at quantity and neglecting quality. There's a great deal of what is called tokenism in Nigeria. They just say, what is the quantity? How many books has he published?
That's right.
But you can't find any of those so many books that an author claims to have published that has a contribution, original and substantial contribution to knowledge, which is really the yardstick internationally. You must, if you say you published a book, you must indicate that you've made original and substantial contribution to knowledge. But not many people know this. They just say, how many books has he published? Just like how many bills were passed, without looking at the quality of those bills. As you said, many of them, unfortunately, were sloppy. Perhaps because there was too much politicking in the 8th National Assembly. Right from the onset, right from the inauguration of the National Assembly, the stage was set for confrontation between the National Assembly and the executive. And that impacted, in my view, very negatively on the quality of the work that was done by the 8th National Assembly. Of course, this is not to undermine them. This is not to underrate the amount of work that was put into. After all, these bills went through all those. In fact, in some cases, they had to repeat those bills a number of times. But that is past now. We are looking at how do we improve on the previous performances. You mentioned the issue of inadequate funding and inadequate resources available to both chambers, the Senate and the House of Reps. That is an issue. It's a big issue. There are things that the National Assembly needs to do. In fact, from the time when I was in the Senate, about 2002-03, we understood the need to create a National Assembly budget office. And as we speak, I don't think that National Assembly budget office has been created. If it is created, it will need to be adequately staffed with competent people, adequately resourced to ensure that when it comes to budgeting, both in the passing of the Appropriation Act, and internal budgeting in the National Assembly, things are done in a proper way, including savings of the sort that you mentioned. So that is. And I just want, at this point, to make a point by way of caution to Nigerians. People are talking of savings. National Assembly, they are too wasteful, even Senate. Some are saying Senate should be scrapped, and then we should have a unique camera. That would be different from the bicameral system of the US presidential system that we have adopted. So we are adopting a US presidential system, but a unicameral. That will create a lot of confusion. Some are saying we should save cost by having only one senator representing a state. But my question is, what is the cost of peace? People are looking at the cost with respect to the proportion of the National Assembly budget relative to the national budget. But to what extent is that contributing to peace in our country? A sense of inclusiveness. People feel, there was a time in the past that a lot of people felt cut out from the democratic process. They were not part. You don't hear that kind of agitation now because there's a fairly balanced level of representation across board. There are some states, if you have only one senator per state, there will be some states where it is the majority group that will produce the governor and produce the senator. If that happens, do you think the others in the two other senatorial districts will keep quiet? You will be, you'll be, as they say, penny wise, pound foolish. So, in fact, that is my summary, that in an effort to talk about cutting costs, we don't become penny wise and pound foolish.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Osumbo. Abu Hamisu, back again to some of the highlights that Honorable Benjamin Kalu has read out with respect to the agenda for the House of Reps. Out of school children. We can talk about education broadly, but out of school children. We keep hearing the numbers. At some point it was static at about 10.3 million. Now we're hearing 13 million, back again to 11 million. Some persons would ask the question, merely making a blunt statement that you would tackle out-of-school children phenomenon might not give an indication as to where you want to go. Of course, the legislative process will deal with that, but what ordinarily are the issues in out-of-school children that ought to be one that will grab the attention of the legislators and say, this is the key focus for us in tackling this problem? Whether as support to the subnational entities, who ordinarily should take care of this problem initially, or otherwise?
Well, that's a very good question, Mr. Kingsley. One of the pitfalls of addressing these issues of out-of-school children, what are the causes, what are the incentives, are merely a reflection of NGO funding, so that the findings are only used as further justification for additional funding. There is no patriotic effort to understudy what the real issues are. If you're talking about out-of-school children, you're talking basically about northern Nigeria. In most of these states, they've declared free education. Parents are not willing to send their kids to school. If you say it is poverty, it is not poverty. It goes beyond that. What we need to do as a nation is to ask, despite the incentives, to ensure that parents send their word to school. Parents are not doing that. But the same parent will pick their child and take this child to Niger. Yeah. So, what are the push and pull factors? What are the incentives? This is what we need to do. Basically, I can tell you what the problem is. The problem started in 1900. The first educational policy. And up to this moment, parents are wary of modern education. And you could equally locate Boko Haram within the context of that very particular issue. It is the moral content of what the parent perceive to be modern education. And unfortunately for us, our design does not even allow for peculiarities so that you can address some specific issues. For instance, when Singapore wanted to transform, what they did was to adopt Chinese, and they have universities where they speak English. It is to take care of the different categories in the society. So we have a totalitarian educational policy that, okay, because we want to create a nation out of Nigeria. But some people are saying we have a reservation. You've not gone to them, you've not sit with them, you've not addressed it. So that is why, since the return to democracy, all the states in northern Nigeria have declared free education, and even textbooks, educational materials are being distributed, but some persons are refusing to send their children to school. So for me, based on this agenda, if the House of Reps is willing to address that issue, the first thing is to engage with those states to find out, to say, okay, we've done all of this, yet we could not secure more, we cannot take more people out of the street to the classroom. So what are the problems? I bet you, if we do that, you will see solutions that will take these kids out. But if we leave it to most of our friends that are in the NGO, they will continue to say there are gaps every day to justify more funding, and more children will continue to join those children that are on the street. Secondly, Honorable made mention of that. I was talking to the highlights of the agenda. What I would love to see, this is my own personal criticism of the document, is to have as heading those issues that I've raised, cutting of costs, stand alone. To say that we're going to work in tandem with, because it's just an explanation from the body, but based on the highlights, if we want to key into what this government is doing and support what the government is doing, I would love to see those cost-cutting issues standing alone, because it's what Nigerians are agitating for. Thirdly, we will do better if Nigerians will be allowed into the workings of the National Assembly. Yes. And these same Nigerians will demand for funding for National Assembly. But once these issues are shrouded in secrecy, you give people room to interpret and misinterpret. And equally,
I'll go, Dr. Hamisu. Yes. I mean, you've made this point, and we know that it's out there in the public space. Is the National Assembly an opaque entity that its workings are unknown?
Yes. You see, I said something earlier on. The dichotomy between agenda, legislating, and the actual delivery. Once the actual delivery is not commiserable to the funding that people are seeing, and it's not even aligning to the agenda, then there is a problem. I bet you, when Nigerian police was working in that very particular direction, Nigerians were against the Nigerian police. But at a point, it was even Nigerians that were advocating for reforms and demanding that their salary structure should be changed, their working environment is bad, and stuff like that. So what I'm saying is, if you open yourself up, for instance, I have a problem, for instance, somebody who has a kidney problem, I can't fund myself, I have a kidney problem. And people ascertain that you have a genuine case. It is people that will even volunteer to raise money for you. But when you say you have kidney problem, and then you are dressed in Gucci, and you are wearing, and so for God's sake, what are we talking about? So,
a sick person
by the time you have 5.5 billion for vehicles, I hope you are getting me. Yeah. And people are
to move from one chance to 5.5 billion.
Thank you very much. So,
this cliche that says, yes, education is the bedrock of any society. It's not just a cliche. That is how it is. Yeah. And most of these out-of-school children turn out to be menace to the society. Yeah. Talking about Boko Haram, 10 years of Boko Haram insecurity. He talked about a soldier that came to his office and said he's paid 30,000 naira. This is a live confession from a soldier. Yeah. What are you going to do as part of the legislative agenda to ensure that security votes that goes to these soldiers get to them?
The security vote that goes to the soldiers, that it gets to them.
It gets really gets to them.
It's by engaging with all the head of the Defense Force. We are currently doing that. We started yesterday with Air Force. Yeah. Today, the Minister of Defense will be coming. It is from their budget that they are going to present. We will find out how they appropriated what is coming to them. Question, based on all these, my office has the public affairs, or not just media. I interact with a lot of these people who come from outside, and I feed the committees with, the information we receive from outside. And that informs their opinion when they interact with these agencies. So when we meet with them, we look at their proposition and then see what is allocated to equipment, what is allocated to training, what is allocated to the welfare of these people who are working in these different agencies. That is the only way we can. We are not going to go into the military and work in the military. It's by looking at their paperwork and making sure that it is tailored to reflect the needs of the particular agency.
Yeah, because I'm talking from the point of somebody going to war.
Yes.
In the Northeast, on that salary, leaving his family behind.
Of course, there are so many of them that, in fact, one of the confession I got also was that the man said, I've been in the North working for 3 to 4 months, and after about 3 months, I will get part of my salary. And then after another 3 months, I get part of it. It's not consistent. So and he was telling me, I will not reveal his identity. He was telling me that this affects my motivation to fight. This affects my motivation to defend. And this makes so many of us to leave our duty post because, one, we are hungry, one, we are thinking about our families. So the welfare of the soldiers, the police, and other security agents is very, very important if we must secure life and property, which is the cardinal function of any government, to secure life and properties. So we are very interested in that, and through this budget analysis that we are doing now, we're going to ensure that adequate funding is made available, especially for the welfare of those who are working in those fields. Let me respond to what my brother from the civil society said about the education and the need for the people to change their orientation. It is one of our objectives also in this agenda to engage the public, to work with National Orientation Agency, to look at the act establishing the National Orientation Agency and see how to, touch it up to make sure that, they do better than what they are doing. Patriotism will be driven through this kind of, orientation. A lot of them don't know the value of education. That is why they are avoiding it. Our fathers and our mothers in the past, their fathers, because they were kings, refused their children from going to school. They thought it was wrong. So it needs the people to, give them the right orientation and make sure they queue into it. We are going to drive that. We are going to, partner with a lot of NGOs. We are going to partner with Ministry of Information. We are going to partner with National Orientation Agency to make sure that we take the message that Nigerians need to hear, not only about the legislature, but about the objective that we intend to achieve closer to the people.
All right, Honorable Kalu, thank you very much. You mentioned National Orientation Agency twice. One of the major challenges facing that agency is funding. So beyond the act or reviewing the act, if I'm sure the National Assembly were to appropriate more funding for the National Orientation Agency and hold them to account for the new funds, it might be a different consideration. Professor Osumbo, you wanted to react to some of the issues on the table.
Yes, the issues that Honorable Kalu was raising with respect to improving on the situation with the military security. And he emphasized the issue of funding. Funding is important, is critical. And I want to recall that when I was a member of the Senate Committee on Navy and the Army, when the military people came before us, they actually said that they were better funded under a democratic dispensation than under the military. We just transited from military to democratic governance, and that was, they didn't hesitate in saying that they were enjoying the level of improved appropriation that they were getting from the National Assembly. And I want to believe that that has been sustained. But the problem, talking about implementation in Nigeria, is this money that has been appropriated, has it reached the source? The salaries, the monies that are meant for the soldiers, for these people, does it get to them? At the beginning, Honorable Dr. Hamisu talked about the ICPC findings so far, that monies that have been appropriated and presumably expended on constituency projects, the reality is that those constituency projects have not been executed or implemented. There's no sign of those things on the ground. So the challenge for me is that we should, beyond talking about transparency, accountability, good governance, one of the things we need to do, the National Assembly needs to do, the legislators generally need to do, is to improve on their oversight function. By improving, even when they talked about the Speaker of the House of Reps and principal officers going for town hall meetings, they should be able to ensure that the projects that they are being led to is actually what was supposed to have been executed with the monies that we are talking about.
That's right, of course.
Because since if the Speaker, if he goes to any other constituency, may not be very conversant with that constituency to be able to say that the project that the honorable member is leading them to is what?
It's not a state government project.
It's not an NDDC project. No, we have
it's not an NDDC project.
No. We have mechanisms.
They will put an emergency signboard after the visit. They removed it. All right.
More important is that for the military, we are talking about the military, there is a peculiar challenge, which I also experienced when I was there. You can go to some offices and say, where are the laptops? We made a provision for 100 computers. We want to see them. But for the military, it's not easy, at least as of then, to say we want to see the ammunitions that you bought. They will say, in fact, they may not lead you into some of those secrets because, but there has to be a way of being able to verify, because people say
that there's value for money.
That what was said to be bought was actually bought. And that what they are showing the Honorable Speaker is not arms and ammunition that were bought 10, 15, 20 years ago. That it is what was appropriated for in the last 5 years and procured that they are being showed. That is a peculiar challenge which you have to devise a way of ensuring that this oversight and these checks and balances, this transparency is brought to bear with specific regards to the military.
Thank you so much, Professor Sumba. We'll be taking a break right now. When we return, Good Morning Nigeria continues. Don't go away.
For more than 10 years, NTA Educational Television has continued to champion the discovery of young scientists and artists across the country. The 2019 National Children's Expo promises to bring to light the best of innovations and creativity in the science and arts categories. Theme: promoting unity and innovations in youths as agents of change through science and arts. Venue: NTA Headquarters Arena, Area 11, Garki, Abuja. Date: Sunday, October 20th to Thursday, October 24th, 2019. For more information, please call the following numbers. This event is proudly supported by NTA ETV, promoting learning.
Move now! The red light won't kill you! Move now!
To dey disobey traffic law, dey cause accidents. Me, I don't talk, say I no go dey do am again because change begins with me.
Cross the other side of the road.
I will no longer endanger my life crossing the express. Instead, I will use the bridge because change begins with me.
Oga driver, stop this bus now, won't come down. you won't carry me past where they go.
Make I dey stop anyhow for road, they cause traffic wahala and accidents. So I go dey stop for the right bus stop because change begins with me.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We have a number of tweets that have come in. We'll quickly go through those tweets and then return to our guests. Chris Simeon has this tweet. Let the agenda, that's the say of the National Assembly, be one that will rejuvenate our economy, put an end to insecurity, and create employment opportunities. That's all I ask for.
And Festus Akimboye tweets, the legislative agenda of the 9th National Assembly captured the challenges facing our country. The 9th Assembly must focus its energies on key bills that will address insecurity, unemployment, all sector reform, poverty and gender inequality, and limit its legislative ambition in other areas. It must work effectively with the executive to address bread and butter issues in our country and come up with a long-lasting new way of funding our infrastructure, including power. And at the heart of the 9th National Legislative Agenda, it must be an ambitious plan to unite our country.
Now, Abbas Obakar's tweet says, we hope that the 9th National Assembly will put the interests of the people and the nation first. Furthermore, with the bipartisan relationship that exists amongst them, we hope for a better legislation in the Assembly.
And Titus Monday Knock tweets, let them review and cut down their bogus remuneration packages and allowances, and Nigerians would know that they are serious. They should do these things openly and transparently.
Now, Mike Anyako tweets, in as much as we encourage their good relationship with other arms of government, however, they should not become a rubber stamp. They should undertake oversight functions with utmost seriousness.
And Utolo Sunday tweets, I want to plead with the 9th Assembly to understand that they are the mouthpiece of the masses over there. Whatever agenda they have, if the masses are not positively impacted, it will be a futile exercise.
Now, this one is coming from Akeju Olagbaju. Very briefly, it says, the legislators are expected to exhibit discipline.
Are not usually the most popular set of people. That is one. The other is that, yes, the public is justified in wanting to know more about what their representatives are doing, particularly with respect to how much they are earning. But first of all, there is a wrong presumption that everything that the legislators earn is decided by themselves and they pay themselves what they like to pay themselves. That is wrong. Because under the Constitution, it is the responsibility of the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission to determine some of these salaries and allowances payable to legislators, members of the National Assembly. So that needs to be understood. When they say, what is their salary? The salary is known. The salary of legislators is known because it's set. If you go to Revenue Mobilization, Allocation, and Fiscal, they will tell you what the pay of a senator is, what the salary of a member of the House of Reps is. However, the problem, the issue is with respect to some other allowances, perks, and benefits that they get. For instance, the ESTA codes that we talk about, traveling. There is a vote in the National Assembly for foreign travels, attending parliamentary conferences all over the world and so forth. They do get some benefits from there, which is outside of what has been approved by the Revenue Mobilization and Allocation Commission.
But there's also, I mean,
just a minute. Right,
Prof, yeah.
Yes, while the public is entitled to know everything that is going on in the National Assembly, in the floor of the Senate, the floor of the House of Reps, there's also what is called executive session. Maybe it's by convention, but there's executive session that whatever is discussed in executive session is meant to be confidential and private. Usually, executive session is used to resolve certain issues, certain burning issues that can polarize the chamber and even polarize the country. But by going into executive session, meaning you clear the gallery, clear everybody, even the sergeant, the clerks, the support staff, are told to exit the chamber. Only the legislators, maybe the clerk of Senate, remains to discuss these issues. They can insult themselves, express themselves as they like there, but at the end of it, they are able to resolve very contentious issues, which must not be announced as the public affairs. He would not be allowed to go and address the public and say this was what we discussed during the executive session. So if the public wants to also know what transpired there, they should know that this is how these things work. What is done in the open plenary, they are invited to stay in the gallery and watch the proceedings, but whatever transpires in executive session remains private and confidential.
Well, okay, thank you. I just, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, in talking about the legislative agenda and then getting your job properly done, I'm sure you are also familiar with public perception issues. The 8th Assembly, the public perception tended to be one. Okay, there was a confrontation between the leadership of the Assembly and the executive branch. But there are also behaviors, by some lawmakers, they are climbing a tree or, running, helter-skelter. And members of the public will say, well, look, what does this mean? And for the 9th Assembly, despite the agenda that you have set for yourself, one key issue that has come up has been, the explanation that we need 5.5 billion naira to go and buy cars. These are the kind of things members of the public perceive and say, are they there for their own selfish interest or they are there to work for us? How many of us, members of the public now, how many of us have cars? You're in charge of public affairs, and that's why I'm raising this question to you. Where are you likely to see a divergence from members of the public in supporting your legislative agenda when there is a perception problem of the functioning of the National Assembly? Say, in this case, the House of Reps.
Yeah, thank you. This perception, I agree with you, that perception is everything, because the way you are perceived, gives birth to the way people behave towards you. Normally they say impression matters, first impression matters. But applying that to the 9th Assembly, what the impression we have given so far is that we are well coordinated and we are people-oriented, and the public interest is prioritized in our agenda. That is one. That is what we're trying to push out. Now, that is not enough. My office, as the chairman, media and public affairs, is charged with the responsibility of building a very good image, before the people, before the citizens of Nigeria, about the House of Representatives. Granted, in every National Assembly, every legislative house, you see people fighting. It's not only climbing. They actually throw chairs at each other. They do all those things because they come in together of people from different backgrounds. They are bound to have disagreements. It happens. In fact, one of the first motions I raised in the House was, against somebody who wanted to carry the mace, just the second sitting in the House. So these things are bound to happen. But how you approach them, how you handle them matters a lot. Like that issue I just mentioned now was resolved through the ethics committee, who invited the person, and he apologized. It was decently handled without it, making a mess of the National Assembly outside. The image of the House of Representatives is not just about the legislature alone. It's about also the legislators. How I carry myself in the public, how I behave. If you see me in the public, I'm throwing money, programs, I'm displaying wealth and all the rest of them. You create a problem for the image of the House of the legislature. So we are very conscious of that. And during the executive sections, like Prof mentioned, it's one of the things that we discuss. This is how you're supposed to conduct yourself. This is like a family meeting where we advise ourselves, carry yourself in this manner, don't do this in this manner, so that the public will not see us differently. On the issue of vehicle, it has come up over and over again. Honestly speaking, it is unfair to the legislature to think that we will be, using our legs to work for Nigerians, to go for oversight functions. It will be unfair to us. Because when you, if you want to, categorize or place us on scales, you see people who are at our level, let's say House of Representatives, we are like the Court of Appeal justices in the other arm of government. Or if you like, you can call us like the ministers. None of those people move around on, without vehicles. The question, the issue, what people see is, like Prof said before, he said people talk about quantity more than they talk about the real quality. We are much in number. We are 360, and that 360 is enough for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So if one of us is receiving 2 million naira for a vehicle, once you multiply it by 360, it gives you what? About 720 million. People will say, oh, 720 million is what they want to buy a vehicle with. No, it's not true. When you break it down, you find out that this amount that people see as big, to be honest, it's not enough.
All right. Honorable Carlo, thank you very much. You say that House of Reps members are like ministers. So the country now has 360 ministers.
But the argument is
no, my argument, I'm talking about the status.
So that President Buhari hear this. Mr. President, we have 360 ministers also in the National Assembly. That's by way of a joke. That's by way of a joke. Anyway, but just to wrap up, in terms of highlights, probably it's embedded there. We haven't heard much about that. It was one issue on the eve of this year's general elections, electoral reform.
Yes.
Hamisu.
Yes. Well, yeah, it is because one of the things that has made democracy to survive is because it provides avenue for peaceful dialogue. Peaceful means of changing and asking some leaders to go. Previously, it used to be war. If I fight you and conquer you, I depose you. But now democracy is saying that you can come queue and select whoever you want to. So, and one of the things that has continued to dog our democracy, especially our elections, is electoral violence. So, anyway, understand this very particular fact that elections are not perfect. So there is need for improvement. So at every point in time, every election comes with their own challenges and the need to enhance the process so that those challenges don't escalate and become the graveyard of our democracy, because election is the bedrock. So that is another oversight in terms of the conception of this document. If it is not there, I think it's something that he has to find a way to put across to these committees so that we don't lose sight of that, because our democracy depends on free, credible election.
All right. It's on that note, we'd like to thank all our three guests who've been with us in the studios this morning. Dr. Abdulrahman Abu Hamisu, our regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria. Thanks a lot for being around.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciation also to Honorable Benjamin Carlo, who is the spokesperson of the House of Representatives, is also the chair of the House Committee on Media and Public Affairs. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Deep appreciation also to Professor Osarieme Osumbo, one of our regular guests on Good Morning Nigeria, two-term senator and former governor of Edo State. Professor Osumbo, thanks a lot for being around.
Thank you very much.
Okay, all right. So that does it for our conversation. Let's go over now to our foreign desk.
Vote counting has continued in Mozambique amidst ballot stuffing allegations. Reports say Mozambicans took to the polls on Tuesday, taking part in presidential, provincial. Not their problem if Turkey enters Syria, calling the former U.S. allies, the Kurds, no angels. Reports say the U.S. is facing intense criticism for withdrawing its forces from Syria, which some say gave Turkey the green light to launch a cross-border offensive against Kurdish-led forces. But President Donald Trump told the media at the White House that the U.S. is not a policing agent, hence time for them to go home. Lastly, a government source in Britain has told the media that there will be no deal to be expected now, as officials have continued to work on the technical details in Brussels. The UK and EU had been hoping to sign off a revised Brexit deal before today's Crunch EU Council meeting. Reports as gathered said it is not likely to be the case, as it is not clear whether there will be a deal at the end of this week.
Time for sports update.